Late in the evening of September 26, 1992, 19-year-old Jennifer Asbenson was waiting for a bus to get to her workplace. She worked as a night caregiver from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at a specialized center for children with special needs. Unfortunately, that evening Jennifer missed the last bus and found herself in a difficult situation. The girl had already been late several times, and her boss warned her that next time she would be fired. This job was extremely important to Jennifer, so she could not afford to lose it. Suddenly, a car stopped nearby, driven by a friendly young man wearing glasses. He politely offered Jennifer a ride. The clock showed 9:50 p.m. The stranger made a benevolent impression and inspired trust, so the girl, finding herself in a desperate situation, accepted his offer. She got into the car and they set off, casually chatting about everything in the world. Jennifer felt comfortable in the stranger's company. He introduced himself as Andrew and asked her name. Along the way, the girl mentioned that she would be working until 6 a.m., to which Andrew suggested having breakfast together after her shift. Jennifer declined the offer, explaining that she had a boyfriend who would not like it. However, Andrew insisted and asked for her phone number. The girl reluctantly recited the digits, actually giving a fake number. Andrew safely drove Jennifer to her destination. She got out of the car, said goodbye, and went to work. Immersed in work affairs, the girl completely forgot about the morning meeting and did not even think that she would ever see Andrew again. But in the morning, leaving the building after finishing her shift at 6 a.m., she suddenly noticed the same car that had given her a ride the night before. Andrew was behind the wheel. He rolled down the window and greeted her, asking how she was doing and suggesting they have breakfast together. Jennifer laughed and replied, "You don't give up." Without thinking twice, the girl got into his car again, since the day before he had been so polite and kind. But as soon as Jennifer was inside the car, the behavior of sweet Andrew changed dramatically. It turned out that at night he had tried to call her, but some old woman answered the phone and said that the girl had given the wrong number. Andrew realized that he had been deceived and became terribly angry, deciding to punish Jennifer. He yelled at her, accusing her of lying, which made the girl remain silent in fear. The enraged Andrew grabbed her by the hair, hit her head against the dashboard, pulled out a gun, and ordered her to turn around. He tied her hands behind her back, lowered the seat as much as possible, covered her face with a hat and glasses so that no one would notice, and drove off in an unknown direction. Soon he turned onto a road leading into the desert. Only occasionally, when the hat shifted, Jennifer could see poles flashing by the window, and her hope for salvation faded with every minute. The girl tried to talk to the kidnapper, appealing to his humanity, and then even wanted to beg him to let her go, but Andrew roughly ordered her to be quiet. At that moment, Jennifer realized that this was probably the end. But in fact, the struggle for life was just beginning. After some time, the car stopped. Andrew took out a huge knife and began cutting off the girl's clothes and underwear. She screamed and desperately resisted, but the criminal turned out to be much stronger and acted skillfully, as if he had done it many times before. He stuffed the girl's own panties into her mouth, and then began to strangle her. Jennifer's face first turned blue, then red. And at that terrible moment when it seemed that this was the end, a feeling arose in her mind that she was drowning in water. In the kidnapper's black, inhuman eyes, she saw absolute evil, a cold emptiness. She thought she had looked into hell itself. Fortunately, he did not manage to complete his vile intention. Instead, Andrew ordered the girl to say that she loved him. Trembling with horror, Jennifer obediently mumbled these words through the gag. But the maniac was not satisfied with the way she did it, so he began to squeeze her throat even harder. The unfortunate girl could neither inhale nor exhale. She closed her eyes, not wanting the hateful face of the sadist to be the last thing she saw in life. A moment later, Jennifer lost consciousness. When the girl came to her senses, Andrew was biting her neck, growling like a beast. Then he got out of the car, opened the trunk, and took out a bag of knives. At that moment, Jennifer realized that he was going to kill her. Despair and mortal terror seized her, but at the same time, adrenaline began to boil in her blood. Gathering her last strength, the girl jumped out of the car and ran away with all her might. But suddenly she felt a burning pain in the back of her head. Andrew had caught up with her and hit her. Jennifer fell, and the kidnapper grabbed her and dragged her back to the car. He threw the victim into the trunk and threatened to kill her. Then he got behind the wheel and drove off in an unknown direction. At that moment, Jennifer lost all hope of salvation. Complete hopelessness paralyzed her body and mind. The girl bitterly thought about how short life is, and that today it would end for her. But then she felt some kind of surge of energy, as if a second wind, and began to frantically pull at the ropes on her hands. Jennifer realized that time was running out, and this gave her strength. With great effort, the girl finally freed her hands and began to fumble in the darkness of the trunk for anything that could help her. Finally, she felt some kind of lever and pulled it. The trunk lid opened, but Andrew noticed it and stopped the car. He approached, roughly closed the trunk, and drove on, not noticing that the victim's hands were no longer tied. However, soon the wheels got stuck in the sand, and the car stopped. Jennifer realized that this was her chance, there might not be another one. She pulled the lever again, the lid opened, and the girl jumped out with all her might and started running. Looking back, she saw with horror how Andrew, with a machete in his hands, was chasing her. But Jennifer did not stop for a moment. She ran with all her might, realizing that her life was at stake. She ran out onto the road, stopped the first car, and begged the driver for help. But the man behind the wheel, seeing the frenzied Andrew with a machete, got scared, locked the doors, and drove away at breakneck speed, leaving Jennifer alone with the monster. But a moment later, the girl saw another car. She rushed to it with a desperate cry for help. Two men saw a half-naked girl running towards them and literally falling on their car. Sobbing, Jennifer told them how a stranger had kidnapped her and was trying to kill her. Looking around, she did not see the pursuer. He had suddenly disappeared. The shocked girl was in a state of stress, with bite marks visible on her neck. The men realized the seriousness of the situation and decided to help. They put the girl in the back seat of the car, gave her pants to cover herself, and drove her to the nearest gas station. From there they called the Palm Springs Police Department and called an ambulance. When the police and medics arrived at the scene, they immediately began questioning Jennifer. She told them an incredible story about how, after work, a man named Andrew had kidnapped her right on the street in broad daylight. He threatened her with a weapon, tied her up, took her into the desert, but she managed to escape. The officers and doctors examined the bite marks on the girl's neck. Meanwhile, she called her mother, hoping that she would take her home. But the relationship with her mother was strained. The woman never came. Instead, in a conversation with the police, she shouted into the phone that Jennifer loved to make up all sorts of stories to attract attention, and that her words should not be believed. Such words from her mother were a terrible blow for the girl. This undermined the trust of the police. They assumed that Jennifer had simply quarreled with her boyfriend and was now slandering him. The officers photographed the bite marks on her neck and let her go. Jennifer felt broken and completely helpless. The girl was haunted by the fear that the criminal would return and kidnap her again. After all, he knew where she worked, stalked her, and maybe even where she lived. Later, Jennifer realized with horror that she had left her documents and purse in Andrew's car, which meant that now he knew all her data, address, and could easily find her. The girl lived in constant fear for her life. She moved out of the house where her own parents did not believe or support her. Jennifer even had to be treated in a psychiatric clinic for post-traumatic stress disorder. She got 2 dogs to guard the house and enrolled in self-defense courses to learn self-protection skills. Gradually, the girl became stronger. In those courses, Jennifer met other people who had also suffered from violence. They became close and always supported each other. It was thanks to this support that Jennifer finally began to recover from what she had experienced and return to a normal life. Everyone called her a real warrior, so she even got a tattoo with that word on her arm as a reminder of her inner strength. And only after 5 long years, the police knocked on Jennifer's door, asking her to go with them to the station. The confused girl did not understand what was going on. They showed her photographs of several suspects and asked her to identify the attacker. And among all the faces, she immediately recognized her kidnapper, whose features were forever etched in her memory. That day, Jennifer learned the shocking truth. It turned out that Andrew was not just a kidnapper, but a serial killer with at least 8 victims on his account. He confessed to these crimes, in particular to the murder of 3 more girls after the attack on Jennifer. He committed his first murder in 1986. The criminal's real name was Andrew Urdiales. At the age of 19, in 1984, he moved to Southern California. While serving in the Army, Andrew killed 4 women, and a 5th during a vacation in Palm Springs in 1995. For more than 10 years, these crimes remained unsolved until Urdiales was arrested when he returned home to Illinois. In 1996, police stopped his car and found an unregistered weapon in his pickup truck. Examination showed that it was the same weapon used to shoot 3 women in Illinois. During interrogations, Andrew confessed to the crimes committed and said that one of the victims had managed to escape from him. Then he thought that he would still be caught, but this did not happen. Feeling impunity, Urdiales continued to kill. Jennifer became the only victim of the maniac who was lucky enough to survive. This news was a real shock for her, but at the same time, the girl was glad that the monster was finally behind bars. The police asked her to testify in court against Urdiales. A lot depended on her testimony. Jennifer was terribly afraid to see her abuser again, to meet him face to face. This was her biggest fear. But the girl understood that she could not refuse, because without her testimony, the jury might not believe the charges and release the killer. So Jennifer had to gather all her courage and tell the court about the horror she experienced, to do it for the sake of all the women who died, so that the monster could no longer harm anyone. At the court hearing, Jennifer said that before meeting Andrew, she knew nothing about serial killers. She grew up in a poor family, in a rural backwater without electricity, running water, or television. Later, the family moved to the city. From childhood, Jennifer looked after her younger brother and a sick relative, which is why she went to work at a center to help children and people with disabilities. She was a very kind and even naive girl, so she did not even realize how dangerous a situation could be when getting into a car with a stranger. Jennifer believed that her pleas for help were heard and that God had sent her saviors in the form of those men who had picked her up on the road. Andrew pleaded guilty but insisted on insanity. However, a psychiatric examination showed that he was quite capable of standing trial and being held accountable for what he had done. The lawyer argued that the defendant's mental disorder arose as a result of the violence he had experienced in childhood from his parents, sister, and cousin. In addition, Andrew had always been a loner. His peers did not want to be friends with him, considering him strange because of his specific behavior. He was unlucky in his personal life, so the criminal harbored a grudge against women. Andrew Urdiales was tried in 3 different states, so Jennifer had to testify against him 3 times, looking into the eyes of her greatest fear 3 times. In 2002 and 2004, he was twice sentenced to death in Illinois, where he killed 3 women. But the criminal managed to avoid execution thanks to the efforts of his lawyer. The first time, the sentence was commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and the second time, the state abolished the death penalty altogether. Then Urdiales was extradited to California, where another trial began in 2018. He was charged with 5 murders and the kidnapping of Jennifer. The 53-year-old criminal was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was sent to San Quentin prison, where on November 2, 2018, a week after the verdict, he committed. According to Jennifer, the evil he had done eventually turned against him. Despite the horrors she experienced, Jennifer did not break down. She moved to Los Angeles, got married, gave birth to a daughter, and found her happiness. Jennifer even wrote a book titled The Girl in the Treehouse, in which she told about the terrible events of that fateful day. This story is about the incredible resilience of the human spirit, about how a girl, seemingly fragile at first glance, found the strength to fight injustice and win. Thank you for watching this story. Write your thoughts about it in the comments. Don't miss the future videos, subscribe and like the channel. Take care of yourself and people you love.